The 12 Chairs by Ilf and Petrov. Part 3. Madame Petyakov's Treasure. Chapter 31. A Magic Night on the Volga. The smooth operator stood with his friend and closest associate, Pussy Vorobyaninov, on the left of the passenger landing stage of the state-owned Volga River transport system under a sign which read, "Use the rings for mooring, mind the grading, and keep clear of the wall." Flags fluttered above the quay. Smoke as curly as a cauliflower poured from the funnels. The SS Anton Rubinstein was being loaded at Pier Number 2. Dock workers dug their iron claws into bales of cotton. Iron pots were stacked in a square on the quay side, which was littered with treated hides, bundles of wire, crates of sheet glass, rolls of cord for binding sheaves, millstones, two-color bony agricultural implements, wooden forks, sack-lined baskets of early cherries, and casks of herrings. The Scriabin was not in, which greatly disturbed Ippolit Matveyevitch.
"Why worry about it?" asked Ostap. "Suppose the Scriabin were here, how would you get aboard? Even if you had the money to buy a ticket, it still wouldn't be any use. The boat doesn't take passengers."
While still on the train, Ostap had already had a chance to talk to Mechnikov, the fitter in charge of the hydraulic press, and had found out everything. The SS Scriabin had been chartered by the Ministry of Finance and was due to sail from Nizhny to Tsaritsyn, calling at every river port and holding a government bond lottery. A complete government department had left Moscow for the trip, including a lottery committee and office staff, a brass band, a cameraman, reporters from the Central Press, and the Columbus Theater. The theater was there to perform plays which popularized the idea of government loans. Up to Stalingrad, the Columbus Theater was on the establishment of the Lottery Committee, after which the theater had decided to tour the Caucasus and the Crimea with the marriage at its own risk. The Scriabin was late. A promise was given that she would leave the backwater where last-minute preparations were being made by evening. So the whole department from Moscow set up camp on the quayside and waited to go aboard. Tender creatures with attaché cases and holdalls sat on the bundles of wire, guarding their underwoods and glancing apprehensively at the stevedores. A citizen with a violet imperial positioned himself on a millstone. On his knees was a pile of enamel plates. A curious person could have read the uppermost one, Mutual Settlement Department. Desks with ornamental legs and other more modest desks stood on top of one another. A guard sauntered up and down by a sealed safe. Persitsky, who was representing the lathe, gazed at the fairground through Zeiss binoculars with eightfold magnification. The SS Scriabin approached, turning against the stream. Her sides were decked with plied-board sheets showing brightly colored pictures of giant-sized bonds. The ship gave a roar, imitating the sound of a mammoth or possibly some other animal used in prehistoric times as a substitute for the sound of a ship's hooter. The finance and theater camp came to life. Down the slopes to the quay came the lottery employees. Platon Plashuk, a fat little man, toddled down to the ship in a cloud of dust. Galkin, Polkin, Malkin, Chulkin, and Zolkind flew out of the raft beer hall. Dockers were already loading the safe. Georgetta Tirapolskik, the acrobatics instructress, hurried up the gangway with a springy walk, while Symbievich Sindievich, still worried about the scenic effects, raised his hands, at one moment to the Kremlin heights and at another towards the captain standing on the bridge. The cameraman carried his camera high above the heads of the crowd, and as he went he demanded a separate cabin in which to set up a darkroom. Amid the general confusion, Ippolit Matveyevitch made his way over to the chairs, and was about to drag one away to one side.
"Leave the chair alone," snarled Bender. "Are you crazy? Even if we take one, the others will disappear for good. You'd do better to think of a way to get aboard the ship."
Belted with brass tubes, the band passed along the landing stage. The musicians looked with distaste at the saxophones, flexitones, beer bottles, and esmargdoshes with which the sound effects were armed. The lottery wheels arrived in a Ford station wagon. They were built into a complicated device composed of 6 rotating cylinders with shining brass and glass. It took some time to set them up on the lower deck. The stamping about and exchange of abuse continued until late evening. In the lottery hall, people were erecting a stage, fixing notices and slogans to the walls, arranging benches for the visitors, and joining electric cables to the lottery wheels. The desks were in the stern, and the tapping of typewriters interspersed with laughter could be heard from the typist's cabin. The pale man in the violet imperial walked the length of the ship, hanging his enamel plates on the relevant doors. Mutual Settlement Department, Personnel Department, Office, Engine Room. To the larger plates, the man with the imperial added smaller plates. No entry except on business, no consultations, no admittance to outsiders, all inquiries at the registry. The first-class saloon had been fitted up for an exhibition of banknotes and bonds. This aroused a wave of indignation from Gulkin, Polkin, Mulkin, Cholkin, and Zolkind. "Where are we going to eat?" they fretted, "and what happens if it rains?" "This is too much," said Nitch Sestrin to his assistant. "What do you think, Seryozha? Can we do without the sound effects?" "Lord, no, Nicholas Konstantinovich. The actors are used to the rhythm by now." A fresh racket broke out. The five had found that the stage manager had taken all 4 chairs to his cabin. "So that's it," said the five ironically. "We're supposed to rehearse sitting on our berths while Sestrin and his wife Gusta, who has nothing to do with our group, sit on the 4 chairs. Perhaps we should have brought our own wives with us on this trip." The lottery ship was watched malevolently from the bank by the smooth operator. A fresh outbreak of shouting reached the concessionaire's ears. "Why didn't you tell me before?" cried a committee member. "How was I to know he would fall ill? A hell of a mess we're in. Then go to the Artists' Union office and insist an artist be sent here immediately." "How can I? It's now 6 o'clock. The union office closed long ago. Anyway, the ship is leaving in half an hour." "Then you can do the painting yourself. Since you're responsible for the decorations on the ship, get out of the mess any way you like." Ostap was already running up the gangplank, elbowing his way through the dockers, young ladies, and idle onlookers. He was stopped at the top. "Your pass?"
"Comrade!" roared Bender. You, the little fat man, the one who needs an artist."
5 minutes later, the smooth operator was sitting in the white cabin occupied by the fat little assistant manager of the floating lottery and discussing terms. "So we want you to do the following, comrade," said Fatty. "Paint notices, inscriptions, and complete the transparent. Our artist began the work, but is now ill. We've left him at the hospital. And, of course, general supervision of the art department. Can you take that on? I warn you incidentally, there's a great deal of work."
"Yes, I can undertake that. I've had occasion to do that kind of work before."
"And you can come along with us now."
"That will be difficult, but I'll try."
A large and heavy burden fell from the shoulders of the assistant manager. With a feeling of relief, the fat man looked at the new artist with shining eyes.
"Your terms?" asked Ostap sharply. "Remember, I'm not from a funeral home."
"It's piecework at union rates." Ostap frowned, which was very hard for him. "But free meals as well," added the tubby man hastily, "and a separate cabin."
"All right," said Ostap. "I accept, but I have a boy, an assistant with me."
"I don't know about the boy. There are no funds for a boy. But at your expense, by all means. He can live in your cabin."
"As you like. The kid is smart. He's used to Spartan conditions."
Ostap was given a pass for himself and for the smart boy. He put the key of the cabin in his pocket and went out onto the hot deck. He felt great satisfaction as he fingered the key. For the first time in his stormy life, he had both a key and an apartment. It was only the money he lacked. But there was some right next to him in the chairs. The smooth operator walked up and down the deck with his hands in his pockets, ignoring Vorobianinov on the quayside. At first Ippolit Matveyevich made signs, then he was even daring enough to whistle. But Bender paid no heed. Turning his back on the president of the concession, he watched with interest as the hydraulic press was lowered into the hold. Final preparations for casting off were being made. Agafya Tikhonovna, alias Mura, ran with clattering feet from her cabin to the stern, looked at the water, loudly shared her delight with the balalaika virtuoso, and generally caused confusion among the honored officials of the lottery enterprise. The ship gave a second hoot. At the terrifying sound, the clouds moved aside. The sun turned crimson and sank below the horizon. Lamps and streetlights came on in the town above. From the market in Pochayevsky ravine there came a hoarse voice of the gramophones competing for the last customers. Dismayed and lonely, Ippolit Matveyevich kept shouting something, but no one heard him. The clanking of winches drowned all other sounds. Ostap Bender liked effects. It was only just before the third hoot, when Ippolit Matveyevich no longer doubted that he had been abandoned to the mercy of fate, that Ostap noticed him.
"What are you standing there like a coy suitor for? I thought you were aboard long ago. They're just going to raise the gangplank. Hurry up! Let this citizen aboard. Here's his pass."
Ippolit Matveyevich hurried aboard, almost in tears. "Is this your boy?" asked the boss suspiciously.
"That's the one," said Ostap. "If anyone says he's a girl, I'm a Dutchman."
The fat man glumly leant away.
"Well, pussy," declared Ostap, "we have to get down to work in the morning. I hope you can mix paints. And incidentally, I'm an artist, a graduate of the higher art and technical workshops, and you're my assistant. If you don't like the idea, go back ashore at once."
Black-green foam surged up from under the stern. The ship shuddered, cymbals clashed together, flutes, cornets, trombones, and tubas thundered out a wonderful march. And the town, swinging around and trying to balance, shifted to the left bank. Continuing to throb, the ship moved into midstream and was soon swallowed up in the darkness. A minute later, it was so far away that the lights of the town looked like sparks from a rocket that had frozen in space. The murmuring of typewriters could still be heard, but nature and the Volga were gaining the upper hand. A coziness enveloped all those aboard the SS Scriabin. The members of the lottery committee drowsily sipped their tea. The first meeting of the Union Committee held in the prow was marked by tenderness. The warm wind breathed so heavily the water lapped against the sides of the ship so gently, and the dark outline of the shore sped past the ship so rapidly that when the chairman of the Union Committee, a very positive man, opened his mouth to speak about working conditions in the unusual situation, he unexpectedly for himself and for everyone else began singing. A ship sailed down the Volga, Mother Volga, River Volga, and the other stern-faced members taking part in the meeting rumbled the chorus, "The lilac blooms." The resolution on the chairman's report was just not recorded. A piano began to play. K.H. Ivanov, head of the musical accompaniment, drew the most lyrical notes from the instrument. The balalaika virtuoso trailed after Marochka and, not finding any words of his own to express his love, murmured the words of a love song. "Don't go away. Your kisses still fire me. Your passionate embraces never tire me. The clouds have not awakened in the mountain passes. The distant sky has not yet faded as a pearly star." Grasping the rail, Symbievich contemplated the infinite heavens. Compared with them, his scenic effects appeared a piece of disgusting vulgarity. He looked with revulsion at his hands, which had taken such an eager part in arranging the scenic effects for the classical comedy. At the moments the languor was greatest, Gulkin, Polkin, Mulkin, Shulkin, and Zolkind, who were in the stern of the ship, began banging away at their surgical and brewery appliances. They were rehearsing. Instantly the mirage was dispelled. Agafya Tikhonovna yawned and, ignoring the balalaika virtuoso, went to bed. The minds of the trade unionists were again full of working conditions, and they dealt with the resolution. After careful consideration, Symbievich came to the conclusion that the production of the marriage was not really so bad. An irate voice from the darkness called Georgetta Tirapolsik to a producers' conference. Dogs began barking in the villages, and it became chilly. Ostap lay in a first-class cabin on a leather divan, thoughtfully staring at a green canvas workbelt and questioning Ippolit Matveyevich.
"Can you draw? That's a pity. Unfortunately, I can't either."
He thought for a while and then continued.
"What about lettering? Can't do that either? Too bad, we're supposed to be artists. Well, we'll manage for a day or so before they kick us out. In the time we're here, we can do everything we need to. The situation has become a bit more complicated. I found out that the chairs are in the producer's cabin. But that's not so bad in the long run. The important thing is that we're aboard. All the chairs must be examined before they throw us off. It's too late for today. The producer's already asleep in his cabin."